Okay, Ron, so let's try to begin near the beginning. You're a Buddhist geologist who's written a book about evolution from the perspective of a Catholic theologian paleontologist. How did that happen?
You know, sometimes I ask that question myself. I mean, why in the world would a sane person want to jump into the middle of this very vitriolic, nasty debate? And, you know, sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. Mm-hmm. But I found, as I was reading various bits of biological literature, that the view that the materialistic biologists have of the human condition is very limited and, to be brief about it, wrong. And I figured that someone had to stand up and say, wait a minute, the emperor has no clothes.
Okay. So you talked about the materialistic biologist, but in reading some of the portions of your book and from your website, it's my impression that you really don't have much of a problem with evolutionary accounts of how our bodies came to be, of legs and feathers and hair and internal organs and stuff like that. So that's not the bone you wish to pick, if you'll pardon the pun.
Not at all. I mean, creationists and intelligent design folk have a tendency to make a big deal about the holes in the evolutionary story. And they are blowing smoke. The evolutionary story is incredibly robust. I would say almost every other month or so you hear about another fossil that's been discovered that ties together species whose relationship previously was determined mainly by inference. Mm-hmm. And in the last couple of decades, whole fields of study have been developed to study life on Earth, including using mitochondrial RNA to see how species on Earth today are related. Mm-hmm. It turns out they seem to be related pretty much the way the fossil record would tell you. Mm-hmm. There's studies using oxygen isotopes in teeth to see how the diet of various animals changed over time, which is related to the change of plants over time, which is related to climate over time. And just very recently, they've developed a technique for using isotopes of transition metals to monitor the oxygen content of sediments in the oceans. And there's a big research group now working on the whole question of testing whether the Cambrian explosion, when life sort of appeared mm-hmm. in various complex ways over a short period of time, mm-hmm. like 50 million years. And I would say within a few years we'll know whether this has been caused essentially by the fact it was the first time in Earth's history that oxygen was present on the Earth's floor.
Sure.
So this evolution story is incredibly robust. And if you want to say that evolution is wrong, then you have to dismiss all of physics, chemistry, geology, biology, all the science that has been come about in the last 150 years.
But that said, you've got an issue to raise here, and that is not the stuff, right, but consciousness, mind. Some might use the word spirit. So this is where theology and whether you're a scientific theologist or a theologian scientist, I'm not sure how we put this, but what's the issue that you raise in your book about evolutionary accounts of the emergence of consciousness, and why isn't consciousness part of this whole grand story in the way that it's being told?
Well, consciousness is a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, I can tell. I think you're conscious. I mean, I can tell your eyes are open. I can see facial expressions responding to what I say. But I cannot tell whether you're saying, oh, God, I hope this interview gets over quickly. This is a dog interview. Or whether saying, God, Ron's doing a great job. And, you know, if you had a whole bunch of electrodes sticking out of your head and I could see the parts of your brain that were being lit up, I still couldn't tell. So consciousness is completely outside the realm of scientific investigation.
So you find consciousness to be important, but the scientific methodology doesn't provide a sufficient explanation. But surely consciousness, if it's that important, has been around for a while? I mean, I'm thinking still in evolutionary terms. Did it arise with us? Did it pre-exist humans? Where's the beginning, and how did the changes come about?
That's a pretty profound question. As I said, we have a hard time interpreting consciousness unless someone's being responsive to us. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure my dog is conscious, because she responds to various things. But I'm not at all sure that, or how to determine even, if a fish is conscious. One of the quotes I really like is a quote from Henri Bergson, who is a philosopher who actually predated Teilhard on the whole business of consciousness and evolution, is that it's as absurd to assume that a single-celled organism isn't conscious as it is to assume, because it has no brain, as it is to assume that it can't digest anything, has no metabolism because it has no stomach. Right?
So equating consciousness with the presence of a brain would be one of the objections that you would have, and one of the concerns of trying to explain mind only in terms of the organ that we associate with the mind. Is that fair?
I think you can be pretty sure that the brain is important, right? Mm-hmm. We've all met people who have had brain injuries or have had Alzheimer's whose consciousness is in some degrees limited. Mm-hmm. But the interesting question is whether or not the brain is a transmitter or a receiver.
Wow. There certainly is ambiguity.
Certainly is ambiguity.
Certainly is ambiguity. So, Ron, we've gone over what science has right, which is a whole lot of the material explanation for how life came to be as it is. What's it got wrong?
Well, for example, one of the big books in biology in the 20th century was Richard Dawkins' The Selfish Gene.
Right.
And in fact, that is an important part of modern geology texts. And the key thesis in this is that the major bit of value in life is the information tied up in our genes.
Right.
Well, Jeff, you've already had kids. You've done your thing. I've done my thing. According to Richard Dawkins' view,
it's over.
It's over. We might as well kill ourselves and, turn all that resources over to the breeding stock. I mean, when you look at the way that, for example, several of the neo-atheists or biologists, Richard Dawkins one, E.O. Wilson's one, and they use their rationale to say, evolution proves there is no God. And if you cut through the bluster and all the smoke and mirrors, you find that their logic goes like this. The first premise is there is no God. The second premise is that biology operates by natural selection. And the conclusion is there is no God. Even a 10-year-old could tell you there's something wrong with that logic.
You can't build a conclusion into the premise.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It's not surprising that academic people have a lot of misgivings when talking about religion. Because creationists and fundamentalists in general have a very anti-intellectual view. God said it, I believe it, that settles it. And the neo-atheists make a big point about this. They make a point. You can either be a reasoning, intelligent atheist or a benighted religious person who believes in fables from ancient times. And I wrote the book partially to make it clear that there's a lot of intellectual depth to understanding religion, and that both sides, both the scientists and the creationists, have big blind spots, make statements that have absolutely they cannot justify in any way or another, and are guilty of very sloppy reasoning.
So maybe I know from reading some of the book, maybe the place to finish this is a little bit odd, but let's go with it. Let's finish with just an excerpt from this poem that you allude to in the book by John Godfrey Sachs, "The Blind Men and the Elephant," and it goes like this. It was 6 men of Indostan to learning much inclined, who went to see the elephant, though all of them were blind, that each by observation might satisfy his mind. And then it goes through each of them, and they touch a different part of the elephant. So let's drop down to the end of the poem. I think we get a sense of this. The sixth no sooner had begun about the beast to grope than seizing on the swinging tail that fell within his scope. I see, quoth he, the elephant is very like a rope. And so these men of Indostan disputed loud and long, each in his own opinion, exceeding stiff and strong, though each was partly in the right, and all were in the wrong. And so maybe that's what you're after, is that science, religion are onto very powerful and important truths, but they're partial truths, and that maybe there's something to be heard from both sides. Thanks very much for being with me today.
Thank you, Jeff.
Frost's book, Religion versus Science, Where Both Sides Go Wrong in the Great Evolution Debate, is due out in September.